Thanks for joining us this afternoon on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Lauren Lemanchek. Now let's get to your headlines. Happening right now, a March snowstorm is moving across southern Minnesota and into Wisconsin and Illinois. Here's a look from a traffic camera that's just south of Albert Lea. You can see lots of snow covering the road there. It's been that way since early this morning. Now check out the mess this storm made as it creeped into the state earlier today. You can see whiteout conditions again outside Albert Lea and blue earth near the Iowa border. New this afternoon, Minnesota State Senator Justin Eichorn facing federal charges for allegedly trying to solicit a minor for sex. State charges against Eichorn have been dropped. The Hennepin County attorney says that's common once federal charges are filed. Eichorn has been in jail since being arrested earlier this week. According to a criminal complaint, Eichorn texted an undercover officer posing as a 17-year-old girl several times starting on March 11th. The two did discuss age multiple times and rates for sex, according to court documents. Eichorn was arrested in Bloomington at a predetermined location where he was set to meet the 17-year-old girl. Members of the Minnesota GOP are demanding that Eichorn step down. His first court appearance is set for tomorrow. All eyes on downtown Minneapolis today as the verdict watch in the Feeding Our Future fraud trial is underway. A jury deciding the fate of former executive director Amy Bach and her co-defendant Salim Saeed. Now, if the jury says they are guilty, they could face at least 30 years in prison. Both sides of this courtroom battle made their final points yesterday to the jury, summing up 5 weeks of trial. Saeed, a former restaurant owner, is a co-defendant with Bach, who previously ran Feeding Our Future. Prosecutors say they profited from the federal child meal program, I should say, and their excuses just don't add up. Saeed's attorney said he actually made meals for all the kids he claimed to have served. Bach's team says she was the victim here, lied to by the people working beneath her. Now let's keep the big picture in mind. Prosecutors say Feeding Our Future was a fraud scheme worth $250 million. In the Dominican Republic today, there's still no sign of the missing U.S. college student who vanished while on spring break nearly 2 weeks ago. The young man, believed to be the last person to see her alive, was in court for a chaotic hearing. NBC's Jesse Kirsch was in the courtroom and has the latest from Punta Cana.
Joshua Reeby was surrounded by a crush of international media as he went into and left a Dominican Republic courthouse yesterday without everything he wanted. The judge granting him a partial victory, saying he should be free to move around without a police escort. But at the same time, the judge ruled that courtroom was not the proper venue to address Reeby's passport issue. It appears at this point Reeby still does not have his U.S. passport. According to CNN, Reeby's lawyer says that they're trying to get him a new passport from the U.S. Embassy. We've reached out to the State Department repeatedly about Reeby's case, but so far have not heard back. But there is another curveball in all of this. The judge scheduled another hearing for March 28th, and it's not clear if Reeby has to be there in person. So at this point, we don't know if Dominican authorities would let Reeby leave this country even if he had a passport in his hand. Back to you. Well, developing this afternoon, President Trump saying he had a, quote, very good conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The focus of the hour-long talk was President Trump's recent call with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the possibility of beginning the end of this country's war with Ukraine. Now, this comes after Russia and Ukraine launched attacks against each other just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to a partial ceasefire after speaking with President Donald Trump. Now, Ukraine has already agreed to a full ceasefire, so long as Russia does the same. Minnesota Representative Tom Emmer says he believes that Ukraine and Russia are on a path to peace.
Again, I do say Donald Trump is a master negotiator. I mean, there is no other leader on the world stage that has his experience and has shown what he has shown in his first term, what he's willing to do and what he can get accomplished. If anybody can help these people get together and bring peace back to the region, it's Donald J. Trump.
Now, here's the details we have on the proposed ceasefire that Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. say they have all agreed to. Starts with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, along with negotiations on a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. In the past, President Zelensky has pushed for security assurances from any future Russian military action and has said that NATO membership was one of the only ways to ensure a permanent peace. And now there's confusion on the front lines in Ukraine, where this war has been raging for years. That's where Richard Engel is right now.
Here in Ukraine, President Trump's latest initiative to secure a ceasefire never got off the ground. It never took hold, not even for half an hour. This is despite a telephone call nearly 2 hours long between President Trump and President Putin, in which, according to readouts from the Kremlin and the White House, President Putin agreed to stop for 30 days attacks on Ukraine's energy sector and infrastructure. And according to Ukrainian officials, shortly after that conversation, Russian drone attacks were continuing once again, hitting a Ukrainian hospital, hitting power sources for the railroad industry here, according to the company. And President Zelensky said that Vladimir Putin's words don't match reality. It doesn't mean, however, that this process is over. Both sides say they are committed to it. They continue to thank President Trump for this diplomatic initiative, and discussions are supposed to resume in Saudi Arabia this Sunday, and President Zelensky today will have an opportunity to speak with President Trump. So the latest ceasefire, which Ukraine has already said it agrees to, and by the way, there were also Ukrainian attacks inside Russia overnight, so both sides were shooting at each other. But they both say they are committed to a process, but a process which so far has failed to take hold. Richard Engel, NBC News, Kharkiv, Ukraine.
If your kids are in rec sports, listen up. Right around dinner time tonight, the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board is set to vote on keeping pre-formed teams for the fall. For Summer League, the city moved to a centralized sign-up for rec sports leagues. This would guarantee spots for everyone, but eliminate pre-existing teams. Some coaches say that disproportionately affects Black and Native youth. New documents show the Park Board's resolution calls on staff to come up with a way to keep those teams in time for the fall. Tonight's meeting starts at 5 p.m. With recreational marijuana now legal in Minnesota, the state is taking steps to detect when a driver is high. New data was just released on the results of a pilot program that could be rolled out across the state. Ian Russell has the story.
On Minnesota roads, old problems require new solutions.
Driving while impaired by drugs or a combination of drugs and alcohol is not a new problem. And it's not getting any better.
Change may be down the road for Minnesota.
I think these devices will be extremely helpful for law enforcement officers around our state.
State Patrol says the number of impaired drivers has gone up in recent years, and now the expansion of marijuana access.
Again, we hand the actual swab to the individual. We coach them through it.
These two machines use oral swabs to test for 6 different things that can impair drivers, including THC, cocaine, methamphetamines, and opiates. Tuesday morning, state law enforcement leaders shared the results of that testing with local media.
We detected more than one drug in 62% of these tests. More than one drug over half the time.
57 drug recognition evaluators from 41 law enforcement agencies across 36 counties were a part of this project. In total, they administered close to 330 tests on drivers who voluntarily agreed to take them.
The average street officer out there may not have that high level of training, and so this is just one other tool that they can use to reach that arrest, no arrest decision.
Mike Hansen with the Office of Traffic Safety says the intent is to have these available in the same way officers have breathalyzer tests. These devices cost $5,000 each, with testing cartridges running around $30. It's money that Hansen says is well worth it.
If we can save one life by deploying these things, it is absolutely worth every penny we invest in it.
The results of that pilot project were sent to the state legislature. It's now up to them to make a decision on these devices. Now, they're just like a preliminary breath test, meaning an additional test would need to be done, and the initial test that those devices do cannot be used in court. What you're seeing right now is not a Hollywood movie. This is fire rescue video showing how quickly a wildfire burning in Florida whipped out of control, forcing highways to shut down outside of Miami. So far, there are no reports of any injuries or threats to any structures, but more than 3,600 acres have been burned so far. Ahead of the annual NFL League meeting, the Green Bay Packers are proposing banning the tush-push play for the upcoming NFL season and beyond. That play involves a quarterback taking the snap from under center and trying to run forward while multiple players line up behind the quarterback to push his backside. The tush-push has become controversial because of its effectiveness. According to ESPN research, the Eagles and Bills have run the play a combined 163 times in the last 3 seasons and converted for a first down or scored a touchdown on 87% of those plays. Stick with us. We have more news and weather coming up after the break.